All right, we are live here at Axe to Grind. I am Alex McCrease, aka Archon. I am joined tonight by Mr. John C. Wright, one of the grandmasters of science fiction. Some have called him the greatest living science fiction author.
They were
John.
referring to my weight and girth, though. I mean, to be
No,
fair.
I think the praise is well merited. There's many of us secretly talk behind your back about how awesome you are. So.
I still am working a day job, so being a great writer has not yet compiled itself into lasting fame. But I'm hoping my latest book will turn that around.
Well, there you go. You know, we were just before we came live, John and I were talking about the challenges of being a content creator today when you just constantly have to self-promote. And if you're kind of an introvert, it doesn't really come naturally. Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert, John?
I am someone who doesn't believe in psychology. I don't believe in astrology. I don't believe in genetics. I'm a very skeptical man, so I don't think that. I think the word shy is what you mean. And I am, like most bookish people, I do have a shy side. I try to keep it hidden underneath my blustery, forceful, fun-loving personality. So I don't. No. I mean, I'm not too embarrassed to promote myself. I just don't know how.
Right. No, so I actually think there is something to the introvert-extrovert distinction that's made.
Sure, there's something to all these things. It's just that I don't believe in any of. I don't think any of them are very precise. I think you do better if you. I think if you want real insight into psychology, read a man named Thomas Hobbes who lived in the 15th century. He'll tell you what's really motivating most people.
Well, that's a grim take on mankind.
It's not as grim as what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, brother. So there are certain things. I'm a guy who's very pessimistic about mankind, very optimistic about the divine. So let me put it that way. I don't think any man is born damned, but I think all men are worth saving.
Okay.
Now, I hope that doesn't get too theological for a light conversation about space opera.
No, we're going to end up talking about those things anyway.
Because you have to mention the Force if you're going to start talking about theology and space opera.
Well, let's start there. So everyone, the genesis of having John on the show was, as you guys know, I did a poll to ask what game I should do next. And after the various ACKS supplements, it was Aeon Star, the tentative name for my space opera RPG, scored #1. Simultaneous with that discovery, as it turned out, Mr. Wright was releasing Starquest, the first book in his new space opera series. And of course, he and I have known each other many years, dating back to when we worked together at Every Joe. So figured, hey, let's bring it all together. And you know, some people have already gotten a little excited here. Carl Gabler says, if McCrease does the Aeon Star space opera game, I want to see it adapted to the Starquest setting. Starquest rules would be fun for a role-playing game. Okay, so why don't we start off, John?
Yes.
What is space opera?
Space opera was originally meant as a term of derision, similar to soap opera, talking about when an author didn't do much homework to throw up his space background and just used the consensus tropes of a Western, but put the guy in a rocket ship rather than on a horse and gave him a blaster gun rather than a 6-shooter. Okay, it was the word was originally meant in mockery, but as time went on, certain authors deliberately leaned into the childlike wonder, the gigantism, the scope, and the astronomical scale of space adventure stories, boys' own space adventure stories. And the word space opera mutated to come to mean that, you see, come to mean a story that is just rollicking fun on a huge scale, good versus evil, with a clear moral code, and the heroes are heroic. Okay, and the villains are terrible, and they have snidely whiplash mustaches, and they sneer at the camera, and they chew the scenery, and the women are all gorgeous and half clad, unless you're an optimist, in which case they're half nude. And I mean, to take a look at old Flash Gordon serials.
Sure.
That has all the elements. It's got action, it's got adventure, it's got sword fights, it's got ray guns, it's got beautiful women, it's got lion men, it's got everything you want. That's what space opera is. Space opera is big, bold, morally ungray, and gigantic.
Okay.
You see?
Yep.
And it's mostly science fiction flavored rather than adding the technical details that Arthur C. Clarke liked. So it's kind of, it harkens back to our pulp roots, which is where the genre really takes its strength from, you see. Because in the pulp days, we didn't care that much about genre differences. If you had a weird tale or a great idea, you would just throw it into the book. And so there are elements in H.P. Lovecraft, which are both science fiction and fantasy. Likewise in Robert E. Howard. Likewise in all the great old pulp masters. See? So, but I gave you a long answer when I should have given you a short answer. You ready for the short answer?
Let's do it.
If a planet gets blown up in the first chapter, it's probably a space opera.
Right. Okay.
So Star Wars, Planet Alderaan, kablooey. Space opera.
There it is. Yeah. All right. So when did Star Wars stop being space opera?
Star Wars stopped being space opera definitely by the time Disney made the Last Jedi. Because in The Last Jedi, you were no longer good guys versus bad guys. It wasn't Flash Gordon fighting the evil, merciless Emperor Ming. It wasn't Buck Rogers fighting Killer Kane, the space gangster. It was the inner turmoil of Luke Schmuckwalker, who had given up on being a hero because his nephew was feeling bad one day, and he decided to murder the kid in his sleep, and the kid used the psychic powers to throw him through the ceiling. And that broke up the Jedi school, and so now he cut himself off by the Force, and then later he uses the Force to reconnect himself to the Force. So, and no planets were blown up, and none of the heroes were heroic, and the damsel in distress did not need rescuing, and the plucky robot sidekick wasn't all that plucky, and everything about Last Jedi was not only bad. I felt it was an insult, a personal insult to every Star Wars fan who ever used the Force, whoever breathed air. So I said, so as a joke, let me tie this into my origin story. As a joke, I wrote up a review of that movie by not referencing anything in the movie. I simply made up another movie of what Last Jedi would have been like had I written it. And I talked to my family, and I were in the car, and my wife is also an author, and my grown kids are both wannabe authors. So we cobbled together a plot that sounded pretty good. So as a joke on my weblog, I wrote up a review of that movie, and talked about the space ninjas and the space pirates and the exciting scenes with the Millennium Falcon diving into a black hole and about to be torn to pieces by the gravitational tides and so on, and how the Sith could come back from the dead as red glowing Force ghosts. So they weren't gone, you see. Right. In order to show how you would do a sequel, normally you would do a sequel by unwrapping another layer of the onion.
Right.
And at the end of this make-believe movie review, I said, in a nearby parallel universe, which is not as happy as ours, they have a much worse movie called Last Jedi. And don't bother to go see it, because it's not as good as this. Well, I got so much positive feedback. I got so much applause from my readers, my gentle and goodly readers, that I said, okay, I'm actually going to write this up for real. Right. Because I also saw Nick Cole putting together a military SF version of let's do the Stormtroopers as if they're the good guys and make the Legionnaires the grunts. Yep. And it was good. And he's written 20 books in that series. Yeah. He and his who's the other guy? I'll be ashamed if I can't think of his name, of his co-writer, crank him out on a fairly rapid fire basis.
Yes.
So I said, wow, I want to do that. I want to put my money where my mouth is. I actually want to write up a space opera that should actually be an honest-to-goodness space opera. But I also want to take my own twist on it, because while this is going to be an homage to Star Wars, stealing, I wanted also to steal things from other sources too, and maybe add one or two things I think Star Wars itself might need. Like, for example, their Jedi Knights, they were kind of cool because they were sort of Oriental mystics, like space samurai. Everyone likes space samurai. How can you not? But I wanted my Jedi Knights to be my version, to be more like knights and less like Jedi. So I decided to call them the Templars, because the Templar order in real life has this mysterious, spooky reputation of being involved in the occult. And I said, okay, sure. Knights with psychic powers. Why not? And I borrowed an idea from Nick Cole. I hope he forgives me for paying homage to his genius. But I decided the Empire had outlawed all supernatural talk. They'd outlawed all religion, all investigation into psychic effects. Okay, so the Force, basically, I don't call it the Force in my book, but the Force was outlawed. I also thought there was a dearth of space pirates in the movies, not in the extended universe. There's space pirates in the extended universe, but I wanted to have more space pirates. So the first chapter in my book has my bold Captain Athos of Star Patrol. You can tell what kind of book it is because it's called Space Pirates of Andromeda, and the main character is an Star Patrol officer crawling up the blast tube of a pirate raider called the Devil's Delight, so he can cut his way into the life support through the engine block. Okay, right. Hoping the pirates don't turn on the engine and blow him to smithereens before he gets in.
Yep.
Now, if I can just wax poetical about my own work for just a second, the other things I decided to put in is I wanted to have an homage to the Shadow from the old radio plays because I'm a big fan of the Shadow. Mm-hmm. Jason Anspach, yes, and Nick Cole and Jason Anspach. I could not remember Anspach's name. Galaxy's Edge is the name of the series. By the way, if you're only going to buy one book this year, after buying mine, go buy the first book in Nick Cole's series because it's good. It's readable. It's a page turner. He knows how to get the action rollicking. But again, it's military SF. It's not his book is military SF. My book is actual honest to goodness space opera. There's a difference. This
is your book, Starquest Space Pirates of Andromeda. I've got it thrown up on Amazon. I've also got the link in the description of the video for those of you.
Can you make the picture bigger? Because this cover art I was very pleased with.
Let's see. I think I can. There we go.
There is. Let me tell you one or two things I like and didn't like about Star Wars and what I changed for Andromeda. First, I didn't put it in a galaxy far away. I put it in the nearest galaxy I could find, which is Andromeda, which is a galaxy twice the size of ours. And because I am an actual astronomy buff, I had decided long ago not to make up any wonders of outer space if the real wonders were there already. There's lots of stuff in Andromeda Galaxy like you would not believe. They have two supermassive black holes orbiting the core of the galaxy. In cosmic disturbance in the ancient days disrupted the spiral formation, so the stars are now arranged in two concentric rings rather than the spiral arms like in our galaxy.
Oh, wild.
And there's other things like the warp and the claw stars and so on and so forth that I also put into my background. Now, obviously, it's not much is known about Andromeda, so I made other stuff up. The lady in the center here is Lyra Zero Centauri. Her planet, it dies in the first chapter. I'm not giving away any secrets because you'll find out if you read the first paragraph.
Right.
When she's a little girl, she's like 7 and her parents are killed. And it being a space opera, she has to be a space princess, of course. And I wanted to make her have psychic powers because I don't like female warriors. I did not like. It actually kind of offended me that Mary Sue, I can't remember her name from Last Jedi.
Rey
picked up a lightsaber having never been trained. Rey picked up a lightsaber having never been trained and defeated a trained Dark Lord.
Right.
I mean, I agreed. He was a young Dark Lord. He was a dark princeling, not a dark, but still, it bothered me. I'm with C.S. Lewis. I think women in combat is unsightly, is useful as a last resort, but there's been too much of it in literature recently. So I decided the females with psychic powers would be more like nuns, more like shrine maidens. So she has a bow and arrow that is psychic that can drive back demons, but that she's not supposed to use on people. You see?
Yep.
And instead of the dark side of the Force, I decided to go kind of Cthulhu flavored for what the dark entities were that existed outside the galaxy where there's no light, that forever hunger for the human worlds and seek to destroy them. I call it the Dark Will. That's the bad side of the Force.
So is it a separate power, or is it an alternative side of the same power, or is that a secret to be revealed?
There is a golden will, and there is a dark will that has rebelled against it. You see?
Yep.
So now I'll point out that this is often forgotten that in the original Star Wars, there's only the Force. The dark side is a corruption of the Force. It's not an co-equal thing. Mm-hmm. Some people like to talk about gray Jedi and stuff like that, but there's nothing like that in my book. I think that's kind of silly. I go with the original. There's the good guys, and badness is a corruption of good. That's the way it is in real life. So I made it that way in my book. Mm-hmm. You see? Mm-hmm. The guy in the mask in the background. I decided that everyone needs a version of Lee Falk's The Phantom if you have any story that has pirates in it. If you're not familiar with Lee Falk's brilliant The Phantom, he's a guy who in the 16th century swore an eternal oath on vengeance against all pirates everywhere. And when he started getting old, he passed his mask and his purple suit over to his son, who carried on the tradition, and everyone thought it was the same guy. And then his grandson and great-grandson, and so the legend began to spread through the jungles of Bengali and among the scared pirates that the guy could never die, that he was a ghost who walks, you see. So I said, oh, I've got to have a guy who pretends to be that he can never die, but he can. And I decided that the older brother was wearing the mask and got killed by pirates. This is not a spoiler. This shows up right away in the beginning.
Right.
So the younger brother took the vengeance, took the oath, donned the mask. Now, my mask is the lion mask there is actually kind of creepy because it was meant for the lion man race. It was meant for the Nemean race, not for humans. But I allow for interbreeding between certain of the races of the galaxy in Andromeda. So he's a half-breed. He's half lion, half man. He has good night vision, for example. He's got quick reflexes. But when he puts the mask on, he becomes superhuman.
Right.
Because the thing enters his brain, and he doesn't know if it's haunted or if it's high technology or what it is. You see, but it's a family heirloom. He's got to carry it on. Now, the family heirloom skips some generations. His grandfather was my version of Darth Vader. His grandfather was Lord Doomshadow. Now, I have a bad guy named Lord Doomshadow, so you know what kind of book this is. I'm not trying to be subtle here, you know.
Right. So, question for you.
Sure.
We had talked about this a little bit. Technology, right? So, we were having this discussion on the ACKS Discord about the levels of technology in space opera.
Mm-hmm.
In a game like Traveler, I'm sure you're familiar with Traveler. You know, they have like 15 different tech levels.
Right.
We felt like for space opera, you basically have like below the ability to travel at light speed or hyperspace. Then you have like the hyperspace civilizations. Then you have the very peak of hyperspace, like cutting edge experimental stuff. And then you basically have magic, high tech magic.
Sure.
And I was curious, you know, what did you do for technology in your series? How are you breaking it out?
I can tell you what I did for my series, but I can tell you what I would do for a game, because what I do for a game would be different from what I did for my series.
Let's hear both.
Space opera is usually not a high-tech science fiction genre. Now, I'll make an exception for that. I will say, if you haven't read Doc Smith's Lensman series, please go out and read it, because it's prime pulp. It's the best pulp I've ever read. In the Lensman series, a new super weapon is invented at least once per book, sometimes twice. And so they start by blowing up starships and end up by blowing up planets, then larger planets.
Right.
Then they bring in a faster than light antimatter planet from a parallel dimension or something, and clobber the enemy planet like nobody's business. Now, in a Star Wars game, however, there's one super weapon, the Death Star. And usually things are pretty. It's not usually an arms race like it is in some other science fiction stories, like in John W. Campbell Jr.'s The Mightiest Machine, for example. I'm talking about stories written in the 30s, which I'm sure no one in your audience is old enough to know what I'm talking about. Usually in space opera, the technology level is ray guns and swords, and you can fall among primitive people, and you're supposed to be scared of them because they can shoot you with a bow and arrow. Or bop you with a boomerang. So you still have to wrestle with them in your ripped shirt because you're Flash Gordon, and you have to wrestle a space alligator and do whatever you need to do to be a hero in a space opera. Now, in my background, I took a little bit of inspiration from. I actually thought that was a lapse on Star Wars. I thought the Star Wars background in the extended universe is well thought out, but the background in the movies is not. It's basically not referred to very well. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I said I'm going to take a page from what they did in Babylon 5. In Babylon 5, there were races below the tech level, planetary races and pre-industrial civilizations, pre-atomic civilizations. Yep. But then there were also at least 2 tech levels above that. You know, so I actually established that there's tech levels in my story, and basically what I do as an old D&D player is I just have any piece of technology from the old days, from the ancients, as a magic item.
Yep.
I just treat it like a magic item, you see, and it can't be reproduced. Now, in this background, I also have a series of wars that led to the creation of the Empire that destroyed a lot of the ancient civilizations. Only 2 of the original elder civilizations are still around, you see. Mm-hmm. And I basically have 4 different tech levels above the high tech level.
Oh, you have 4
including
above the high-tech level. Okay.
Well, I don't think I can recite off the top of my head, but there's basically, I wanted to have cavemen in my story too. So my main character gets crash lands among a bunch of primitive savages,
As you do.
And they have, as one does, and he impresses them, and he gathers them together in a fighting force, and they overcome the space pirates that are using their planet as a weapon depot. See?
Yep.
So they end up with a spaceship.
So it's as if the Ewoks captured the Death Star in a sense.
Yeah. The Ewoks captured the Death Star. Right. And under galactic law, in my background, once you have sent a spaceship from one star to another, you are a member of the galactic community because you're now interstellar.
Right.
The other thing I did is I made my galaxy very much like the Roman Empire, because I figure in outer space there's no mountains, there's no oceans, there's no seas, so there's no boundary between any two polities. Either everyone has to be together, or there's going to be constant war. See,
right.
So the empire and the republic that preceded it, and the 5 other forms of government that preceded that, have always been the same. Have always been the same polity. You see, and I just use the Roman names for things. The leaders are consuls, and one of my characters is a tribune.
Right.
Like that.
Right. Right. So this is interesting because if you look at the intro you wrote to the book on Amazon, it's very lighthearted, right? Space opera must be great, gallant, gigantic, grandiose. If you're weary of weak, wan, woke, and wasted works, your wait is ended. Etc. It's very lighthearted.
I was speaking with the poet who wrote Beowulf, as you can tell from my use of Anglo-Saxon alliteration in the earlier. No, I was just trying to be lighthearted. I was trying to get to be, what they used to call gay, but I don't know if they have that word anymore.
That word means something different nowadays. Yeah,
not to me, but you know what I'm talking about. Filled with gaiety.
Yes, frivolous.
Because look, I'm tired of reading books that are boring. I'm tired of Last Jedi was grim.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see a Buck Rogers episode that was grim? Can you imagine Buster Crabbe being grim? No, certainly not. So that's what. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were about to ask me a question.
You did. I was. Yes.
My apologies.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
I'm so enthused about my book, which I hope will sell like hotcakes.
What I was going to say is that it's easy to mistake a jovial attitude for a lack of seriousness in world building.
Yes,
right?
certainly.
Right? But clearly, you have put the thought into the world building.
Unfortunately, yes.
Right, you've precisely identified the location of real astronomical locations.
Yes,
you've built out the history of your galaxy.
Unfortunately, in excruciating Tolkien-esque detail. Yes.
See, that might be unfortunate for some people. Here in the Autark community. Here in the Autark community, this is not considered a misfortune. This is considered the way it should be done.
Brother, if you want to turn this into a game, I have so much background material. It would be easy peasy.
See, that's very interesting. Because not every writer does. Like I've attempted to collaborate with some writers, and they're basically just making it up as they go along. There's nothing there when you try and ask, well, what's the details on this? Oh, just fill it in however you want. Like, well,
I had fun trying to make up what space combat would really be like under the conditions of the space drives I had invented. Now, none of these were original to me. I'm just using ideas that smarter people than me have made up. But I decided that my galaxy was some 12,000 years old, shading off into mythical times. And so I decided, well, there was going to be tachyon drive that moves at the speed of light, and there was going to be warp drive that moves at 10 times the speed of light, and there was going to be spin-dizzy engines that move at 100 times the speed of light, and there's going to be hyperdrive, which operates by forming a hypertube from one point to another point. You leap into the 4th dimension and back again. And then you could have horrific accidents, and your ship will never be seen again. Right. And there's also things that live in the 4th dimension that sometimes are mankind attracts their unholy attention, and that's where the H.P. Lovecraft stuff starts to come in.
Right.
So
right.
Oh, and I have psychics. My psychics can astrally project, and they go into the dreamland. And in the dreamland, the astral world, half the stuff is symbolic and half the stuff is real. And you kind of don't know what you're looking at when you look at it. And it's kind of supposed to be. I try to keep it as spooky as I can.
Right.
I don't like magic. I don't like psychics when it's treated like it's an alternate technology. These guys don't know what they're dealing with, even if they've studied it. And even the wise old master is not always sure what's going on.
Now, I think the important question that everyone is thinking is, are there lightsabers?
I have a thing I call a ghost blade, which looks like a transparent metal, a blade made of glass.
Mm-hmm.
And I made them look more Christian than Oriental. I made them look like cross-hilted swords, and the
Right.
guys also have shields.
Right.
But if you look into the depths of the crystal, you see it's deeper than the volume of space it occupies. And when you're in the right state of mind, a golden light comes out that banishes evil. And as long as your will is firm, the ghost blade is made of a material spiritual alloy, which I never explained how you make a material spiritual alloy, but it's half and half. Right. And as long as your will is firm and stern, your shield cannot be breached, and your sword can cut through any material, anything made of matter. The arrowheads on Lyra Centauri's shrine bow, which is a bow she uses for her shrine maiden work, her exorcist bow, are also made of the same material, so she can shoot through walls. You see,
right?
But in the first scene, one of my main characters, his nerve breaks when he sees a horrible tragedy happen behind him, and his shield, which is made of glass, loses its light, which is coming from him. See.
Yep.
And so, no, I don't have lightsabers, but I have something that I thought was as near as I could tiptoe to being like a lightsaber that I could get. Yeah. But I also made it dependent on your frame of mind, on your concentration powers, because it's a spiritual weapon, not just physical.
That was a sad opening scene, by the way.
Oh, I'm glad you think so. I tried to make it as completely miserable as I possibly could.
You see, and you were just 2 minutes ago, you were like, can you imagine Buck Rogers being grim? And then you broke my heart in chapter 1, man.
Did you read the Slan by A.E. Van Vogt? Johnny Cross's mom is shot to death in front of his eyes in chapter 1 in the prologue.
I know. No, I know.
Look, I got to give the girl motivation, okay?
That's right.
She takes a dire vow. Oh, one thing I'm sick of in stories is when people take oaths and vows, it's not taken seriously.
Right.
So I said, okay, in my background, if you take an oath, the stars hear you. And the stars in this background are kind of astrology mumbo jumbo, and they affect men's fate. They can bless and curse. So if you go against the stars, you're cursed, you see. Now, what I don't tell to the readers, and this may be a bit of a spoiler, is the stars actually worship this thing called the Star Maker, which is older and wiser and kind of outside of time and space. That is a creature of all good, sort of a prime mover. I don't really say who it is, but I do say that much of the ancient lore was lost when the Milky Way got destroyed, and some of the secrets of the higher lore were taken away from mankind as punishment because there's certain like things that we're not meant to know.
Right. That's it. So it's in the future then.
Oh yeah. It's in the far future. Yeah. That's one thing I changed from Star Wars. I didn't want to have it to be in the past. I wanted to be in the remote future.
Makes sense. Right. Makes sense. And that's why there's humans everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also why all the aliens, the native races of Andromeda look a little alien, but the races that migrated from Milky Way look like Earth animals. And there's a reason for that I don't really go into. But I do drop a hint that maybe they were bioengineered.
Yeah, exactly.
Long ago. Maybe all the Earthmen come from Earth, but they did something bad which I haven't made up yet. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can imagine a ton of things. You know, sure. I mean, there's like bad, and then there's like we accidentally blew up the galaxy bad, and so like
I didn't say accidentally.
Right.
The dark will doesn't like stars that shine. It likes neutron stars and black holes. You see, because the dark will likes the way things were before the Big Bang. That's the conditions it thinks that and this is the Cthulian entity, the Azathoth entity that's never going to come on stage. Though there are hints dropped that that's ultimately the guy who's behind everything. Right. The enemies of the Templars, I don't call them Sith, I call them Stygians because they're from the planet Styx.
Right.
You know. So.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
It has nothing to do with the Egypt of Conan. It's actually from the original Styx.
The original Styx, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, we're all dipping from the same well.
Sure. I mean, I'm trying to do an homage to what I liked in my youth and to what I think is missing from modern woke science fiction. Right. What's missing from space opera is space opera. And I hate to say it, but Last Jedi was nothing like a space opera. It didn't have any of the space opera elements.
Now, are the space princesses going to be scantily clad? Because I haven't seen any scantily clad space princesses so far.
Unfortunately, I could not think of a way to get Lyra into something scantily clad because she's also a shrine maiden.
Right. She's like a nun.
She dresses like a nun. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a drawback. That's a drawback.
I feel
but,
like
no. Wait a minute. But I do have. Let me think about this for a second. I do have an all-girl crew of pirates that worked for Lady Jade, the Pirate Queen.
Okay.
Because what I decided in my here's the thing though. I actually made up 2 stories. I made up a story that was like what was the original Star Wars, that was the prequel to this story of what happened when the Empire was overthrown. You see, and all the main characters of this story are Athos, Napoleon, Mevrian, and Myrdath the Beautiful, who are the children of the pirate hunter and the pirate queen that overthrew the Empire. The pirate hunter I decided was going to be a duke. I decided to make my Han Solo character into a duke rather than a rogue. You know, and I decided that the Dark Lord comes from his family line, not from the family line of my version of Luke as the farm boy. But I gave the farm boy, I decided he was an Irish bog trotter, so I gave him bad manners and hobnail boots. And he's an old man now, but he still has his rustic ways. But he also has insight into things that no one else has because he's a flipping psychic. He's he's a mind reader and stuff. So Lady Jade was the pirate who was working against the Empire, and Duke Lone, this is back in the old days, was the Duke who was sent out to, who was the head of the pirate hunting guild, who was the privateer guild, who had letters of marque and reprisals to send out to get her, and they fell in love with each other and decided to, after a few conflicts, as they do. So my main character is a highborn aristocratic lady who was raised by a pirate queen. So she carries a blaster and a stiletto in her knife under her evening gowns, so she can shiv anyone who gets in her way.
There we go.
Sorry, I love these characters. I love all these characters.
No, this is all.
And my guys all want to live up to what their dad did, and they can't because there's no more empires to overthrow. See,
right?
And one of them is kind of just become sort of a lazy drunk because he just can't live up to his dad's expectations. Originally, he was going to be called Napoleon Lone because he was going to be a spy. Napoleon Solo because I was going to name him after Han Solo, but I decided to call him Lone anyway. Get it? Lone Solo.
Yep.
No one will figure that one out.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So Carl has the important question we all need to know: will there be a character who dresses up in skin-tight leather cat suits?
That's an excellent question. Well, yes, there is. There is a cat burglar who is stealing only the most rare and unstealable, the most well-protected art treasures in the galaxy, and no one knows why this girl is doing it. And they think it's a girl because she leaves a scented handkerchief with a little image of a grinning tabby cat on behind her in the spot where she stole, in the locked vault that no one can get into, or inside the force field box. There's no way around. As you do. And as it turns out, she has a double life, and it's one of the other characters, and she's got another motivation that's not quite what she seems. Right. So yes, so I put in Catwoman. I already mentioned that I put in Lee Falk's the Phantom. I also have the Shadow because there's this. One of the guys has the astral projection powers, and he can make himself visible as a gloomy shadow to
that's cool. Yeah.
Other people, to criminals. And I have but he has the masking technique, which he learned from, of all things, the Duck race, the Duck witches. Every race has some psychics, and long ago they discovered what the unified field theory of the psychics were, and that's what the Templar Order is based on. Right. My version of the Jedi. But one of the races, their psychic power was the ability to block psychic intuition. So everyone thought the Ducks weren't psychic, and they were actually highly psychic, but they could ward themselves from any divination or observation. So the Ducks are basically comedy relief guys, but they have kind of a heroic streak, sort of like hobbits to them. Yeah. Like I said, every one
of the races inspired by the RuneQuest Ducks?
No, I wish I had. They were inspired by Howard the Duck from Marvel Comics. Yep, because I wanted to have a duck ninja like Moose from Ranma 1/2, who turns into a bird, but it's still the same kind of thing. Turns into a goose, not a duck, but still.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about scale, because one of my complaints with Star Wars is Star Wars pretends to be very large scale, like your galaxy is 50 million planets, etc. And the space station is the size of a moon. But every time they actually come to show a battle, like, they're smaller than a small World War II skirmish, right? It's 20 fighters versus 20 TIE fighters. Maybe there's 10 capital ships. And oh, by the way, the fate of the entire galaxy depends on this. And you can contrast this with Lensman, where you know, there's billions of people getting killed in Lensman and
Yes.
armies in the size of millions and billions.
Yes.
And so where do you and I understand why it happens, because the bigger the scale, the harder it is for that one hero to really matter, right? Like Audie
Right.
Murphy was America's greatest hero in World War II, but
Sure.
Audie Murphy didn't do anything remotely on the scale of what Luke Skywalker does to save the galaxy, right?
Right.
So like
Right.
the bigger the scale, the harder for individual heroics to matter. So where do you come in on the scale in your battles?
I decided to make my ship battles to be about the size of historical battles with ships. So
Okay.
the largest battleship battle, as far as I know, in World War One or two, was about 200 capital ships.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, that's going to be. I'm going to have it be around that order of magnitude. Let's say 2 orders of magnitude, hundreds of ships, not the 10,000 that would legitimately and realistically be floated. Because Dr. E. Smith was right about the magnitude. Okay, they would be astronomical, and you would need to have a gigantic computer brain, the Directrix, if I remember the name, to keep track of all the ships, and you'd need a trained squadron of clerks just to keep in track of where all the flotillas were.
Right.
So no, my fighting is not going to be on that scale. I am, however, going to have a battle ring world, at least in one scene, which is, and
Like Larry Niven type ring world, you mean?
Yes, but if it was built for offense, not just defense,
Right.
And I do try to keep I do try to put the main character into the position where he's the one who makes the decision. Now, some of these battles are going to be on stage and right up front, and others are going to be off stage and are just going to be referred to, but they're going to happen. So, what I did is I just asserted that I did a little back of the envelope calculations. Out of the trillion suns of Andromeda Galaxy, I said 1 in a billion is habitable or is terraformable.
Okay.
Terraformable, and I said for every 80 or 90% of those which are agrarian planets, you're going to have 10% that are highly industrialized.
Right.
And to build a capital class starship is going to take the industrial output of at least 10 planets. You see?
Okay.
So now I have a very good idea, just from my back of the envelope calculations, to how many warships, how many death moons, how many evil ring worlds both sides have. The hidden empire, which is still called the greatest empire, and the constitutional government, which is called the Commonwealth.
Right.
You see,
So
or the Republic. Oh, and I should mention my main character. I decided that Last Jedi did a disservice to me by having their defector, their stormtrooper defector, not be a kick-ass Marine killing machine, because he's a stormtrooper. He's supposed to be a killing machine. He's supposed to be a military officer.
Yeah.
Okay, not a whip.
It's very disappointing. They did a negative on John Boyega. I feel bad for the guy.
Man, I feel sorry for that actor, because they should have had him. They should have had him do a Samuel L. Jackson on his. He should have been tough as nails. So I decided, okay, I'm going to have an evil stormtrooper who's going to be tough as nails, who's going to find out, and then he's going to have to decide. And I decided, if I was the galaxy, if I was the Empire, and most of my forces got wiped out, and I had to flee from the main planet. I don't call it Rome. I call it Septentrion, but it's Rome. Okay, it's Trantor. It's actually a world city. It's Trantor. It's Coruscant. I just did the same thing that Isaac Asimov did, and I'm sorry, George Lucas can't complain about that, because Asimov was there first. Okay,
that's right.
So they flee to Ravana. Excuse me, I don't call it Ravana. They flee to a alternate capital at the edge of the galaxy. But I decided that the officers and men of the Empire would decide to tell the people that they had won, that they were winning the fight, and it was still going on, and the rebels were only a month or two away from total defeat, you see, because I thought that if you have, in a slower than light universe, the only way you can communicate is through fast and light radio, fast and light ships. And if the Empire controls the radio and controls the shipyards, there's no internet,
right?
That's lawful. I decided I wanted to explain some of the tropes of Star Wars. So I said that there had been an ancient race of master machines that had built Jupiter brains, large as gas giants, that rose up and destroyed their creators. Okay,
right.
And that after they were overthrown by the earliest generation of Dark Overlords, who had psychic powers the machines could not contradict, the Dark Overlords became darker, and they got overthrown in turn, and they were subsided for a while, and they came out again. That's part of my background lore.
Yeah.
So I decided that there's a law enforced by every planet of the galaxy that you can't make any robots smarter than a human. They have to be your level of intelligence. And if they rebel, if they start to disobey their Asimovian programming, never to hurt a human being, they have to be built in basically humanoid form so that you can yank them out of the pilot seat and grab the controls yourself with your hands. And if they fire at you, they have to pick up and shoot a gun with their metal gauntlets. See?
Right.
That, except for things like astromech droids, except for robots doing specialized functions that a human wouldn't do anyway. Okay?
Right.
And I did that because I wanted to explain why you have robots that look like the Tin Woodman rather than the Jupiter brains you would actually have in
autonomous ogre tanks or whatever. Yeah.
Right, or autonomous ogre tanks. I just thought ogre tanks are black tech. They're forbidden by the. But the Empire found a way to overcome the Asimovian programming and could make murder bots, and that was the MacGuffin of the original trilogy that doesn't exist. That's only in the background. And one of the main themes here is that my main characters.
Actually, let me pause you there.
Sure.
So to be clear, like Tolkien, you essentially created a Silmarillion that you haven't published, and then you've got the story that you're actually publishing is the sequel to the unpublished story.
Right, because I'm making fun of Last Jedi. I'm not doing an homage to Star Wars. I have to start with the Empire's already fallen because that's the setup in Last Jedi.
Yep.
You see?
Okay. Right. And so the hidden empire is the first
lies to all of its people completely and thoroughly and globally. Because if you control all access into and out of your planet, you can do that. So my poor stormtrooper, when he decides to cut out on his own, he gets visited by Jaywin. He gets visited by the old man. Because I decided that my version of Luke Skywalker is going to grow up and turn into Obi-Wan Kenobi, because that's what you do.
That's what you do.
You see?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you do. So he's the old wizard. He's the crazy old wizard. So my stormtrooper wakes up when he's in the hospital, and the stormtrooper is thinking that his bosses are going to kill him because he secretly has psychic powers that he's never shown anyone, because psychic powers are illegal in the Empire. But unfortunately, he's a witch hunter. He's a member of the Death Guard, that are the thought police of the Empire, who have to track down all traces of people with psychic powers and get them. So he's basically a witch hunter who practices witchcraft. Well, the guy that he thinks of as the devil, he wakes up in the hospital bed, and the guy's sitting in the chair there, the old man. And the old man says, "Well, I've decided to make you my apprentice."
Now, isn't that a major problem if the way they were able to defeat the super tech Jupiter brains was through psychic powers? That's like humanity's basically their key advantage against, sort of like technical super beings.
Sure.
So then if you kind of eliminate that from the gene pool, it feels like you're setting yourself up to lose. And I guess the Empire did lose.
It also feels like maybe the master machines are not. I mean, they were something like the antediluvian giants in my background.
Got it.
They're long dead. There's no way any of them could be around. And when the cat burglar comes across one that's locked up in a vault that some unwise super criminal has stolen, it's not going to know exactly what her name is and break out and follow her.
Right.
Yep. So maybe that'll happen once.
All right.
Maybe they're not dead.
So you've got multiple menaces then threatening.
Oh,
the galaxy.
Yes. Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
I got 12 books to fill up. Okay.
Wow. 12 book. Really? That's the plan? 12 book series?
That's the plan. Right now, I've written 9 of them in first draft. The first one's coming out today. And I love Nick Cole, so I want to copy his rapid fire release technique.
Yes.
You see?
I was going to tell you actually,
Mr. Gabe,
that's one of his secrets.
Wants me to say what the next release date is, but I'd have to ask my wife because I don't remember.
Is it soon?
We're going through final edits on the first 4 or 5 books, and I'm still writing the 9th book.
Right.
I decided to keep the whole thing on my desk. It's a stupid thing to do if you're a writer. I basically dropped out of writing for like 2 or 3 years to get this project underway. But it gave me the flexibility, because I wasn't working through a publisher. It was just me. It gave me the flexibility to, excuse me, not a major New York publisher. Obviously I have a publisher, Tuscany Books. Tuscany Bay Books.
Is that Jaggy in the background, I hear?
Yes. Except her name is Jaji.
Jaji.
Macros is waving at you. Oh, she's coming over. You'll see her
hello.
You see her appear from behind the.
She's like a force ghost. She appeared. She
the Adventurer of Andromeda. Yes, yeah. Because there's things outside the galaxy that are lurking.
That's right. That's right.
So hey, Josh, when are we planning to release book 2? Depends on how quickly we get it edited.
The cover artist, who's kind of busy.
No release date is yet announced.
2025.
The next book is going to be called Secret Agents of the Galaxy, which tells you what kind of series this is.
Right.
Early
Right.
2025,
I think. So
early 2025, the wife says. She's also my editrix and my financial manager. So.
All right. So I just want to say this because I want you to succeed. So I've been doing a lot of deep dives into audiences and Gen X, Gen Y, etc. And the thing is that what to you or I are old tropes that we're familiar with, and so we have to do them with a smile because to us, space princesses are an ancient trope that's been around forever. I feel like the younger generation.
I have to interrupt. I am the founding member of the new Space Princess movement. It's I and one guy from Canada, Edward Willett, and we formed a new literary movement in science fiction called the Space Princess movement, where we are going to bring back space princesses. And we've retroactively added everyone who's ever had a space princess in their book. So Edgar Rice Burroughs is a member of our group, even though he doesn't know it. Okay.
Right.
But if you want glamour, a kidnapped space senator's daughter is not the same as a kidnapped space princess. Okay. It's just not. It doesn't have the mythical depth to it.
It's true. All right. I'm going to go back to my point.
Go ahead.
Because I wasn't trying to say you shouldn't have space princesses. You should have space princesses.
Oh, no, I wasn't. I didn't think you would say.
What I was going to say.
Who in his right mind would say that?
What I was going to say is that I would fear that the generations today have been so bombarded with subversion and deconstruction that when you present it with it's that kind of a book, it sounds to my jaded and battered ears from too much exposure to Disney that you're making fun of it, and you're not. It's actually you're passionate and you're earnest and you love it. Did
Galaxy Quest, do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Did they make fun of Star Trek?
Oh, of course they did.
Of course did they? Or did they love it?
No, this is okay. So this is a really good question.
Now, right? Last Jedi, they hated Star Wars. That writer, I forget his name, Ryan Johnson, I think.
Ryan Johnson hated Star Wars.
He clearly hated Star Wars and hated it with a passion and hated everyone who had anything to do with it. He hated all the fans. He didn't like our tropes. He didn't like the way we told stories. He didn't like the fact that there was supposed to be a setup and a follow through in a properly run story. Okay?
Right.
Nothing in that movie. I wrote an entire book called The Last Straw, which is a thorough autopsy of that movie.
No. Fully agreed.
And that's the difference. I love The Shadow, so I put him in my book. I love.
But are you making Galaxy Quest? Are you making Galaxy Quest in the sense that it's intended to be read humorously in the context of Star Trek?
No. My main character has her parents killed in front of her eyes in chapter 1.
Right.
Okay. This is supposed to be adventure, and adventure usually starts pretty sad.
Serious. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my main character, my Athos, is he is in dire danger every minute of his life.
Yeah.
And he's not helped much by his older brother Napoleon.
Right.
Who's a senator. Oh, by the way, I should mention one other thing. I noticed about Star Wars. Star Wars actually takes place in 4 overlapping worlds. One is the political world, represented by the princess. One is the spiritual world, represented by the farm boy who becomes a wizard, becomes a space wizard. One is the film noir world, represented by the lovable rogue, the smuggler guy. And one is just the straightforward military world, which we see in the World War I fighter plane dogfights. You see. So I said, okay, I'm just going to do that. I'm gonna have my senator, my space senator, is going to be in the political regime. Realm. He's going to actually be trying to get a declaration of war signed by his committee, and his committee is being infiltrated by psychic dark overlords, by bad guys that he thinks is dead, that he thinks his parents killed 50 years ago. See? Mm-hmm. Oh, that's the other thing. No one in the Commonwealth thinks the Empire still exists. They don't think the enemy exists at all, and in fact, it's forbidden to spread rumors about such a thing. You see, so all my main characters who are convinced that the bad guys are still out there are kind of pariahs. They can't really talk about it in polite society. You see, so and my Lyra, my shrine maiden, is part of the psychic world, and her story arc has to involve the sources of the darkness that corrupted the Templars and created the Scythians, as I call it, not the Scythians.
Right.
I can't think of the name of my own bad guys now. The Stygians, excuse me. You understand my confusion. Both of them are good Conan villains. And my military aspect is going to be carried on by I have a clone trooper who switches sides, or who might switch sides, and so on and so forth. And yet I interrupted you again while you're in the middle of asking me what I thought was an interesting question, so I apologize for that.
Yeah.
What
So
you were gonna say?
no, I totally do, because I think it's important. And important things don't ever slip my mind. So I go back. Okay, so I read what you wrote. Like, let's say the marketing copy for the Golden Age, right? Which was the first book I read of yours, and which was actually I found to be a very profoundly moving trilogy. It's my favorite of your book, of your series.
Good.
That series, and people say things like erudition shines through on every page, meticulously painted, convincing backdrop of human society. Knowledge of the classics distills and retains what is essential about the human experience. Think Coleridge and Xanadu, a beautifully realized, sprawling space epic, wielding a poetic vision that is at once intimate and intricate, yet vast and dazzling. Okay. So then I go over and I look at what I presume your publisher wrote about Starquest, and they
I read
say,
it.
okay, that's fine. Of course, there is a space princess and space pirates galore and an evil galactic empire. Of course, there is a super weapon known only as the Great Eye of Darkness. Like, if I read that, I would almost think that's someone making fun of you and saying, of course, there's these things, there have to be there. And so what I'm trying to tell you is I think your marketing for this book doesn't do credit to the world building and the depth of the story that you're telling.
Brother, if you want to help me market the book, I accept your completely voluntary unpaid aid. So excellent.
Yeah, I just gave it to you. It's worth exactly what you paid for.
It's too late to change. It's too late to change what's on the back cover of the first book.
That's true, but you could change to Amazon at least. Anyway, just from what you're telling me about how you like the depth, the fact you took 2 years to like work this all out.
More like 4, yeah, but
yeah. So you're underselling it, right? Like you should be selling this the way they sell Silmarillion and the Token and the Legendarium and the depth. Like I had someone tell me the other day, he was like, you know what you really need to do for ACKS, Alex? He says what you really need to do is hire someone who's a good voice actor and just have them read your lore in 4-hour long read your lore in 4-hour long YouTube videos, because that's what the kids are into these days. I listen to 4 hours of Warhammer 40K lore all the time.
Here's the thing. I think that there is a great hunger for pulp, and I think we've been poorly served. And there's actually kind of a pulp revolution going on in the background.
Agreed.
So I think that ad copy is going to speak to them. It's going to appeal to them. Now I don't know about Gen X or I have trouble keeping track of your generations. Your earthly generations. I don't know who they are.
The thing with pulp is that pulp. How to put it? So pulp, when pulp was pulp, wasn't pulp.
Sure, granted, but I'm trying to put across that this is non-woke. This is anti-woke.
I get that. For
okay.
Sure.
Well, so the opposite of woke is fun. So I'm trying to sound fun.
No, the opposite of woke is not fun. Yes, I wrote a whole essay about this.
What is it?
So,
what's the opposite of woke?
I'm actually we're going to pull this up on screen.
Is echo, right? EKOW. Echo is the opposite of woke.
I see what you did there.
No, the opposite of woke is Christianity, because woke is an esoteric religion based on Gnosticism.
Well, that could be the case.
It's cultural Marxism. The opposite is Americanism. That's why Star Wars was so poignant. Star Wars was all American. Those guys might be in a galaxy long ago and far away, but they're all Americans. I mean, one guy has a hot rod with a jalopy. It's the same character he played in American Graffiti.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's
the farm boy is from Kansas. I don't care if it's sandy Kansas, but it's Kansas. He's a farm boy.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, hang on. I'm gonna pull this up. So, let me screen share. And
We're running low on time, so you might have to give me the executive summary of your essay.
No, we have 90 minutes if you have time still to go a little longer. So, all right. So this is just what I wanted to throw up here. Let's see if this is all right. So I said there's basically 4 traditions that are fighting it out right now, right? You got respectable realism, civic, decent,
Boo.
dignified. You have the transgressive realism that challenged respectable realism. It's campy, it's challenging.
That's film noir.
Okay.
That's film noir.
Then you have the current woke, which is the dystrophic realism. So this is the body positive, decolonizing progressive. It's what they think is good art. They think bad art is beauty privileging, fascist, fat shaming, heteronormative.
You use too many words when a few words will do. I will tell you what that is. That is the anti-life equation that dark side is seeking.
I'm trying to present it as in their own language for each group.
Very good.
Okay. And then finally, we come to what I think is the opposite of woke, which is romantic realism, which is not that it's fun. It's awe-inspiring, beautiful, heroic, majestic, and sublime. And that's what the Golden Age is, your book, The Golden Age.
Certainly.
It's all of those things. And I think that's what this book is, too. It's just being presented as much more lighthearted than 4 years of work.
So you think I'm being extremely subtle and presenting something as a lighthearted space opera, which is actually a deep philosophical conundrum pondering the nature of forgiveness and the source of all good in the universe?
Yes, I think
I could not possibly be subtle enough to pull off such a outrageous shtick. I just want people to buy my fun adventure story.
The problem is that the people that crave the latter aren't going to know that.
I'm open to, if you can make a practical suggestion for how you'd like to reword the back of the book cover, I will take your suggestion. Write it to me in an email.
I'm gonna assemble my autark brain trust of autistic science fiction fans, and we're gonna put our heads together. We're gonna come back to you.
Very good, because you might save me, because that way I could, if this book sells well, I'm gonna quit my day job, because I really love this series. I poured all of my 20 years of science fiction writing skill into this. And it might be the hugest flop ever, or it might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, or somewhere in between.
John, the fact that you haven't quit your day job is 100% a marketing problem, right?
Sure, I know that, but I don't know how to solve it.
No, but I'm just saying, like, it's a travesty. You should already have quit. You should already have quit your day job and be like turning down the Netflix deals at this point, right? You should be like, should be on the phone being like, no, I'm not going to let your woke TV station have my thing. Click. Right?
Certainly, Mr. Macris, you are skilled in this area. Please tell me what to do. I will follow your lead.
I wish I was.
I actually have tried many things. I've tried many things over the years, and nothing has worked. And
so here's the thing.
I assume that I was under a curse or something.
No, it's not.
Or that God had something in mind for me.
It's not that you were under a curse, actually. It's that you had the misfortune that you became a popular writer just at the moment when the tidal wave of wokeness hit. And so guys like Tor, who would have been pushing the hell out of you 20 years earlier, suddenly were on the other side of that equation.
Tor did not even give me, I don't want to sound bitter, but Tor did not even give me a polite note of thank you when I was up for a Hugo Award.
Yep. No, I know.
They didn't even say, hey, congratulations on getting nominated for a Hugo.
No, I know. So it's a timing matter, but now there's a new spirit in the air.
Yes.
There's a new spirit in the air. So you got to tap
almost a new force. So
Indeed. So, well, everyone I've spoken to,
Mr. Macris, I'm completely serious. If you can give me any suggestions as to how to approach this, I was thinking of trying to make a bigger presence on Twitter. Now that I'm addicted to it anyway.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Because I have 20 years of old essays. I could post one a week or even one a day for years and attract attention to myself. Because my political ideas are also now coming into vogue.
That's right. I found Twitter is good, but YouTube is better in terms of marketing. For whatever reason.
I just got censored by YouTube today, the first time YouTube has ever censored me.
Wow.
I did a podcast where I said, as a faithful Catholic, I am not allowed to take any drug that uses stem cells, fetal stem cells, because Catholics can't use anything that kills a human life, kills a human embryo.
Right. That's doctrine. Yeah.
And they deleted that. They said you can't. That's medical misinformation. You can't say that on YouTube.
Oh wow. Yeah, they get really weird about that. They do. But
yeah, because they hate God. I mean,
Well,
Oh, sorry.
you
If
know,
this is going up on YouTube, I've just cursed you again.
I don't actually monetize on YouTube, so I'm less vulnerable. A lot of people make their living from YouTube, and so they really like. There's a whole separate. I don't know if you ever watched this. There's a whole separate vocabulary you have to use, right? Like you have to say
Yes.
unalive and things like that.
Yes, I am painfully aware of that, and I am ashamed that any American would tolerate that for even an instant, because it reminds me of the evil empire, the greatest empire I just made up for my space opera. Notice how cleverly I tied the topic back into my pushing
well
my
done.
book.
That was well
Thank
done.
you.
Yeah.
But I did. The all the evil empires in pulp fiction have to have some level of political correctness or Nazism or at least Roman brutality to be really cool
Now,
space emperors.
I
Oh, and they all have to have gladiatorial games. Even though Rome is the only one who ever had gladiatorial games, you just absolutely have to have them.
have to have them.
Though,
Yeah.
yeah, but I don't think I have any in my current book, which is a shame.
I just want to say I don't think the Romans were the bad guys. I don't think they were an evil empire. Soft spot for Rome right here.
I am have a very, very soft spot for Rome, and I think they are the best that you can do given a pagan worldview. And I also think that they were about as brutal and efficient as you can possibly wish for. The Nazis had nothing on them.
No, they were
Spartans.
Yeah.
Maybe the Spartans were more hardcore, but the Romans really knew how to rule people. They knew how to divide and conquer. They did not hesitate to punish people. They made up decimation. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
I do,
Okay.
Of course. But
Well,
I mean,
without saying good and evil, let us say they were hardcore.
They were hardcore.
Can we agree on that point? Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I just think if you want to think like, to me, the Carthaginians were genuinely like evil.
Oh yeah,
evil,
yeah.
Right.
Carthaginians are much worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
mean, but we're adults. We can scale things on a scale. Aztecs are at the bottom, then Carthage, then Rome, then the French, British Empire next, and Americans are at the top. The French had an empire. They're pretty mean. You can use the Spanish if you like. If you're a Francophile.
What about the Communist Empire, the Soviet Empire? That has to be pretty far down.
They were at the level of the Aztecs.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
in terms of sheer bloodshed.
In terms of sheer bloodshed, because the Carthaginians at least were sacrificing children in order to placate the gods, but the communists were atheists, and not only were they not placating any gods, they weren't even doing it for reasons of realpolitik. It wasn't to their advantage. It was just the devils that they had summoned up had taken over their minds. I don't know if you've read Tim Powers' Declare, but the Soviets in real life probably were dabbling with things. we know Hitler was. We know Hitler was a bit of an occultist. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. These things are dangerous, and don't.
So is there a theory that the communists were dabbling with the occult? That's interesting. I didn't know that.
I read a book by Tim Powers that was fiction that said so.
Oh, okay.
But I do know that our CIA, that our intelligence services were doing experiments with remote viewing. Mind control.
Absolutely.
Which had occultic overtones to it. They may have contacted something that they don't want to talk about. And I think they would not have done it unless the Soviets were also doing it. Which one started first, I don't know, but they were both looking into it.
I know for a fact that I actually have the documents. I know for a fact the Soviets had a program. They called it the psychotronic program. And they had a research laboratory in Siberia where they were doing psychotronic research. Right. And there's really fascinating papers that have been released under Freedom of Information Act of U.S. essentially agencies worrying about the psychic gap and having to catch up to the Soviets in psychotronic research.
Now, if you're me and you think that the UFO sightings are actually supernatural rather than super technological, you might think the CIA might have stuck a fork into a light socket and woken up something they couldn't put down again. Always dangerous to meddle with these dark forces, my dear citizens. Always dangerous.
I was talking to my wife about this, right? Like at this point, there is literally nothing that could surprise me in the morning news. Like if I woke up and the news was,
did you hear that a Nazi named Donald Trump, who was this guy from a reality TV show, just got elected president of the earth? It's amazing.
Well, I was going to say, if I woke up and I read that the reptilians had landed on the White House lawn and declared an alliance with the Illuminati, but they had been destroyed by the Jewish space lasers, I would have been like, oh, that tracks.
I'm glad they made some use of those lasers. Yes, me too,
exactly.
Unfortunately.
Just what I read on 4chan.
I used to scoff at conspiracy theories, and then they turned out to be right, and I was wrong. And I have a lot of crow that I have to eat. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you also used to be a staunch atheist, correct?
Yes, very staunch. I didn't believe in
Very
anything
staunch.
supernatural. I would have been a good citizen of a good subject, pardon me, of the evil of the greatest empire that I just made up. I didn't believe in
Indeed.
anything supernatural.
Indeed. Yeah.
But I decided if I was going to convert, I was going to go all in. I was going to really convert, you know.
As you should. As you should. Why do
Sure.
things in half measures?
Sure, why? Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I mean, wasn't it C.S. Lewis said that, right? Like, you know,
Yeah,
either
I'm copying I'm following in the master's footsteps. You know.
yeah, either it's
He's
irrelevant or it's the most important thing in the world, but the one thing it isn't is like,
he's the guy who convinced me. The reason why I switched from atheist to monotheist is that as an atheist, I began to realize all my fellow atheists were cuckoo bananas, cuckoo for cocoa puffs. And people like Dawkins, they would make bad arguments in favor of atheism instead of good arguments.
right.
They would say crazy things like religion causes all wars, rather than saying fear, love of gain, and desire for glory causes wars. You know.
Right.
And when I read C.S. Lewis, even though I disagreed with him, he sounded like a sane and mature man.
Yeah.
And I read the guys on my side, they sounded like teenagers, like rebellious teenagers.
Yeah.
You know, and then I looked in the mirror and I realized that, wait a minute. So then the mirror cracked. So something like that happened.
Yeah.
I fell into it and ended up in Wonderland, only to find out that the world I left had been the reflection that the spiritual world was the real world. So that happened to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you and I have chatted about some of your spiritual experiences, and they're similar to some of the ones my wife has had. I myself have not really had particularly strong spiritual experiences, except for occasionally, like, feel like I'm channeling when I write. That's the closest I've come. Is that feel
that
like
was one
getting
reason
in
why
touch
it was
with-
easy. That was one reason why it was really easy for me to convert. Is because I knew even when I was an atheist that the theory that my subconscious mind is making up all these complex interactions just did not pass the smell test. It did not pass Occam's razor.
Right.
The Muse theory, the theory that there are ancient goddesses living on the Helicon in Greece, did explain all the data correctly and it posited the fewest possible entities. Now, how it was that I believed in the Muse and didn't believe in anything supernatural is I thought the Muses were a metaphor for something else that I didn't know what it was, because I knew that my ideas came from, I know not where they come from.
Yes.
And unlike most atheists, I was humble enough to say, there are limits to my knowledge. There's certain things I simply don't know.
Yes.
Where did the universe come from? I don't know. But as an atheist, I said, well, you Christians don't know either, because you're just making it up. Well, obviously the option that the creator was an eyewitness and he did the thing and then he told us, that did not occur to me as a realistic option because I was an atheist. So there we go.
Right.
So naturally, I made the atheists the bad guys in my current book.
Yeah. So I was an atheist for many years. Partly, I think I became atheist when my father died, and I was very embittered about some things relating to like how the church treated him post-death.
That'll do it to you. Yeah.
And but for me, it was when I encountered simulation theory, and I had all of these people, very smart people that had followed materialism all the way down the rabbit hole, and at the bottom of the hat, at the bottom of the rabbit hole, they were like, "We might be living in a simulation." Well, if we might be living in a simulation, that implies a simulator. And if it's a might, then that implies we can't be certain there isn't a simulator, which means atheism is off the table. At best, you can be an agnostic, but you can't be an atheist. You cannot say the sentence, "We might be living in a simulation and I'm an atheist," and not be cognitively dissonant.
Correct.
And so from there, I kind of started exploring things further. And then, my wife had some very profound spiritual experiences, and I had to conclude that she was either a really hot nut job or there was something going on. And I was like, well, she is really hot, but I think there's something going on. So
during the Roman days, it was the women who converted the men.
Yeah, it's true.
And the soldiers. That's usually overlooked by modern historians. The soldiers were the guys who converted first. Well, many a time.
Yeah,
because they're on the battlefield.
And
I'm sorry, late period Zeus is not that impressive of a god to follow into combat. I mean, he's a parasite.
Yeah. Well,
Justin Martyr, after whom I am named, once complimented a Roman pagan by saying, "I hope that your sons treat you with the same piety that Jupiter treated his father, and that your daughter is as chaste as Venus."
Yeah.
And the guy was really offended, and he said, "But Jupiter was a parasite, and Venus was an adulteress." And Justin Martyr said, "Well, they're your gods, not mine."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And what's interesting is when Julian the Apostate tries to sort of bring a higher paganism about, the god is not any of those gods. It's essentially a Hypsisterian
the Stoics worship the stars, which is where I got my idea for my book. See how cleverly I tied that back in?
Yep.
But they thought the universe was a living thing. They called it proneia, or the mind, and they were basically inching closer to monotheism. The Stoics were, and I admired them greatly.
Yeah, my personal favorite of the philosophers is Plutarch. So I've written a whole bunch of essays on Plutarch's theology.
Plutarch was a. Are you talking about Plutarch's Lives, or are you talking about Plotinus?
No, Plutarch. So this is most people don't know this. I didn't know this until a couple years ago. So Plutarch, who was the historian who wrote Plutarch's Lives, was also the leading middle Platonist between the early Platonic philosophers and then the Neoplatonists. And he wrote a tremendous amount of philosophical work, which is not widely read, but it's brilliant.
I have never heard that until I thought of myself as a classical scholar, but I'm not. I never even heard of this until this moment. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I stumbled into it as well, and it's just
amazing.
Really great stuff. So yeah. So what you want to look up is because Plutarch was a philosopher who believed in the god of the philosophers, but he also was a priest of Apollo at Delphi. He was a high priest of Apollo, and so his philosophical work is reconciling the existence of these pagan gods with his belief in a higher monotheistic god. Fascinating.
But what's funny about Julian the Apostate is the soil was just too thin by the time he tried to replant the garden. It just wasn't going to work.
It wasn't there.
Because for one thing, the Christians of those days actually took care of each other, and the pagans of those days didn't. And so anyone who wanted to get in on the action, if there's a plague in your city and everyone leaves but the Christians stay to give you a bowl of soup, your chance of survival increases by like 10%. And he's braving the plague to stay there out of the charity of his heart. So if we Christians want to reconquer the earth, I don't think you can rely on the space lasers. I think we have to do something like that. So
we don't have control of the space lasers anyway. So
I don't think we should make a deal with the lizard people of Alpha Draconis, because they're a broken reed. They'll just break and stab our hand.
You can't trust them. You can't trust
lizard people. I have the lizard people in my background, and they're like the ancient Egyptians and really creepy and really old. And they remember things that no one else talks about. But they're the serpent men of Is. They're actually called the Is, which I take from Robert E. Howard. Right. They're like pre-Atlanteans type guys.
Yep. So. I love that you said it in the future of our world as your X-Men, because I actually had talked to some of the guys on my own Discord about how I thought that was really how you should do space opera, because it explains so much, right? Like, why are there humans? Why is there a shared language? Why are there Earth-like animals everywhere? It's because it's in the far future, and it's a great way to world build.
I made Earth-like animals because I wanted to lower the imagination leap cost of the alien races, and I wanted to have more alien races than Star Wars only introduces at one in the cantina scene, a group that's only briefly viewed, and it's not that satisfactory.
Right.
And I wanted to bring in Thun the Lion Man from Flash Gordon. So I decided that the lions were actually the dominant species of Andromeda, and the humans were merely one of the but basically everything's run by lions. But then I kind of cheated by having my main characters all be half human, half lions.
Got it. Now, are there evil space princesses? Because I have a soft spot for Princess Aura.
I have not only a soft spot for Princess Aura, but actually a devastating crush on her.
Yes.
Don't tell my wife. There is she's in the background. There's an entire race of space mermaids called the Elil, who are evil space princesses, one and all, to the last buxom half-clad. You asked about half-clad space princesses. Yes, I absolutely do. There's a scene. There's a scene where one of my main character has to imitate being a space pirate. He's got to join the crew and work his way up the ranks, going from first mate to captain to pirate commandor to pirate admiral, and then he's got to fight his own relatives, his own cousins, who are the privateers and the pirate hunters. Now, the Pirate Hunters Guild was disbanded by the Empire, so they shouldn't be around anymore. But these things happen. The Elil are all seductresses, all evil seductresses, and they're all gorgeous. So there we go.
Now, do they have fishtails or
when they want? I decided that since this is a space opera, I was not going to get really complicated. That they have a land-going form and a sea-going form, and they swap back and forth at will. Because
that's much better. Right?
Why not? Just.
So like Ariel, the Little Mermaid kind of vibe, but evil.
Yeah, but if Ariel could do it at will.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And there was an evil Ariel in the movie, if you remember, with a beautiful singing voice.
That's right.
And my sirens, I call them mermaids, but they're sirens. They come from the siren sector, which I think if I move my head, you might be able to see in the background here somewhere.
Oh yeah, okay.
The siren sector is near the planets of plunder, which is where the rogues live, the pirate planets, and they are separate from where the evil interstellar syndicate of space is. The sinister syndicate of space is housed in the felony stars. Which is to the south of the Andromeda galaxy.
You have syndicates. This is fantastic. We love criminal syndicates here in Autark.
The criminals. I'm actually writing a scene right now. The one I was writing before I got on the line with you is where one of my main characters infiltrates the meeting of the Secret Seven, who are in charge of the 7 sinister syndicates of space, because they have an assassination bureau, a piracy.
I
chief,
love it. That's fantastic.
A vice admiral, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Sorry, my wife is right. It's the Pirate King.
Right.
And I have to say, by the way, Athos is actually the son of Queen Jade, who was the pirate queen before the Empire fell.
So he's
a space patrolman now. He's a space patrolman. He's the son of a duke, and he's not in the line for the duke. His older brother takes the title, but he's offended at a guy named Ahab, the Pirate King, for taking that title to himself. You see,
right?
Because his mom was queen, and when she was queen of pirates, they voted on who was captain, and they split their shares up the same way in real history.
Right.
Black Bartholomew signed things up. Yeah, and I quote Black Bart's Articles of Confederation in my manuscript at one point.
Yeah.
So this guy is actually like a Democrat among pirates. And the 2 pirate groups are the Black Flag pirates, who are more or less anarchists, and the Red Flag pirates, who are more or less communists.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yep.
And they're all preying on shipping, and Norbert the Fixer is trying to make a deal with the pirates so they can organize it more efficiently to get which shipping lanes will be protected and which will be unprotected, and so on and so forth.
All right, we got 10 minutes left. Let's open it up for a couple audience questions. So here's our first audience question. As one or both of you former Niven Man Kazin appreciators, do you think they hold up in the modern day?
That is an impossible question for me to answer, because I have never known any book, if it's good, to age. I think books that were perfectly fine when they were written are still fine now. I don't think that changes over time. You, as the reader, simply have to make a mental leap and adjust yourself to put yourself in the shoes of the audiences it was meant to be at the time, if that makes sense. I myself don't get offended reading Mark Twain if he uses a word that's too nasty for us to speak nowadays to refer to the way they all talked in those days. Likewise, if I'm reading Homer, I don't get offended that he believes in pagan gods that I don't believe in. So I would say Larry Niven, I think, was one of the masters of hard science fiction. In fact, he was one of the best practitioners of it.
Agreed.
And one of my favorite lines is in the original Ringworld, where when the Kazin says, "If you're going to challenge me to combat, you don't need to go through a big speech. Just scream and leap."
Right.
And Louis Wu goes, "Yeah, scream and leap. Okay, I got it."
My favorite, I was a big fan of the Man Kazin Wars, and my favorite part is actually the opening story when the Kazin assume that because the humans have been at peace for so long, they're going to be easy prey. And the humans are like, nah, we just stopped making war because we got too good at it. And I was like, yeah. All right, so let's see. So we got UNT says, has John mentioned any recommendations on how to do soap operas for a role-playing game?
Soap operas, not space operas?
Yeah,
I don't know anything about soap opera. You have to ask my wife about soap opera. I do know what the formula for soap opera is. The formula for soap opera is the man and the woman are attracted to each other, but there's an obstacle in the way, usually an insurmountable obstacle, and the woman's insight is tested. She has to decide whether or not she has enough insight into the man to see his true character. And if you want to watch something written directed by my cousin Joe Wright, he's not really a cousin, but we have the same last name, so I'm hoping we're a cousin. Go see his version of Pride and Prejudice. I think it's the best adaptation they ever made of that book.
Right on. All right, Bradford wants to know, Bradford, we need to get you on the show at some point. Would it be possible to buy prints of the book's cover art so we can hang those on the wall?
I would have to ask my financial manager. The guy wants a poster of the cover art.
It's possible.
It's possible. Nothing has been established yet.
I mean, it's not hard to do. We can try it. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. So Yuan-Ti has clarified that he meant space.
The way to do
Space
space opera in a role-playing game is I actually liked the West End Games version of Star Wars when it first came out. And in that, they said something I just said on this program, which was a space opera is not it's not an arms race game. It's not investigating big dumb objects like Ringworld. It's a clash of good and evil, action and adventure, space pirates, space princesses, space marines. You run around, you shoot blasters, and you don't worry about the technical details. You're just trying to get action. You're trying to get big action. You're trying to have fun. It's a boys' adventure story set in space. It's basically a Western set in space, which I have to say honestly, Princess of Mars, the first Space Princess book, was basically a Western set in space, except that the Green Martians were communists, not Red Indians. If you see the difference, because they raised all their eggs in common.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's see. So John, UNT has another question for us. Are you a simulationist, gamist, or story gamer? So are you familiar with?
I'm an old man. Look at the gray in my beard. I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what that means.
Yeah. I was going to say, you probably don't know So GNS theory says there's basically 3 ways to play Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games. So a simulationist says, oh, now everyone's not going to follow you.
Too bad. I'm a novelist. Every game I run is a living novel, and the player characters are my main characters. I always make sure the main characters are the center of the action and not merely observers. And I don't run cattle shoot games.
What's a cattle shoot game?
Cattle shoot games where the moderator puts you in a cattle shoot and directs the action as to where you're going to go from point A to point B, and you don't get to decide. You don't have any decision paths.
So that's okay. So this, all right. So this is the problem is you don't know what the theory says, so you're choosing the wrong term. So GNS theory, you have
I like the question about optimist or pessimist or introvert or extrovert. I'm ignoring your terminology and saying I'm a guy who thinks of all games as mutual storytelling. I don't know what your term. You can define your terms to me if you like. I'll listen patiently.
Well, they're not my terms. They're at this point kind of industry standard terms. Not
any industry I know. Go ahead.
Well, you're not a professional tabletop game designer. You're a professional novelist.
No. My game designs are all amateur.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't mean any disrespect to your profession, but I've never bought a single professionally made game in my life. I always make up my own dice mechanics when I sit down to run a game. Except I bought yours as a professional courtesy.
Somewhere.
Very kind of
No, the boys play tested it.
Yeah,
they did. Yeah, they played it. Yeah.
We bought it
Yeah.
too. We just don't use it real.
Yeah. No. So basically, a gamist says that the game is intended for its challenge, and what matters is fairness and adherence to the game rules. Okay. A story gamer says that what matters is that at the end of it all, the players feel like they had a dramatic story experience. And so you as the game master should be kind of changing things as they go and railroading them to make sure that what happens is as dramatic as possible. And
the opposite of what I said.
Right. And then a simulationist says, no, you as a game master, your primary thing is not to run a fair game or to tell a great story. It's to create a living world and then give the players the chance to make choices within that living world. So those are the.
I am a simulationist. I am a hardcore simulationist, far more so than any other gamer I've ever known, because when I moderate a game, the moderator is a neutral and objective judge. I set up the background. I make up what the NPCs are doing. If you don't stop them, the NPCs will carry out their plans. Okay, and I just run the thing I just run the thing neutrally, and I don't cut you any slack.
Exactly.
And I don't go out of my way to make it easy for you, and I don't go out of my way to make it hard for you either.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is literally simulationism. That's simulationism.
Very good. I'm not only one of those, but I'm one of those to the nth degree. So much so that I've never met anyone else who was more so than I am.
So everyone, there you have it. We have found a kindred spirit in Mr. Wright. And so if you were on the fence on buying his book, which you shouldn't have been, you should have already bought it. But if you were on the fence, now you know you need to support it. Yeah. See,
well, here's the main thing I don't like in games. I don't like the idea that if the main characters go off and sit in an inn, that nothing will happen. Right. I want them to be sure that the world they're in is in motion.
Yes.
The good guys and the bad guys are up to something, and their plans are going through steps. All I do is make up what their goals are and what their raw materials are.
Yeah.
And then they just start to go through the motions. I did run a game once where I ran a superhero game once where the player characters didn't follow up any of the clues leading to the Chinese conspiracy.
Yep.
And I'd thrown in all the DC and Marvel characters into that background because it was something I was learning in school.
Yeah.
And after a few sessions, the Mandarin had just taken over all of Asia without being impeded in any way. You know, now as moderator, maybe I should have been less simulationist and actually thrown a few more obvious hints in their way. You know, but so.
Yeah, I had a similar experience in my famous Iron Empire campaign. They discovered that there was a terrible event, the awakening of the dark gods, and they were the only ones who could stop it. And then when it came time, the quest was really hard, and they were like, this is really hard. I think we should just pull back and go back to base.
Let's go back. Let's go back to the inn. Let's go to the Tower of Pillows. I don't think we should visit the Tower of Pain today.
They went back to base. So I'm like,
sure.
All right, well, the skies darken and it begins to rain blood. As the
You're a man after my own heart. You're a man after my own heart.
Yeah. All right. Well, that finishes up basically our 90 minutes. John, any last words you want to share to the audience? Otherwise, I'm gonna just throw your book back here on the screen.
I want to say that this book sounds like it was born out of a spasm of hatred for The Last Jedi, which perhaps it was, but I poured into it all of the love I have for all of these old comics, all of these old pulps, all the stuff that I think has been forgotten by the modern reader. You see?
Amen.
And I particularly think the wokeness has drained the imagination of even the ability to tell a story correctly. I've never read a well-constructed woke story. I have seen well-constructed communist propaganda. I recommend the movie Alexander Nevsky. It was done in the Stalinist era. Prokofiev does the background music. Okay, it's a beautifully well done movie, but it taps into the basic heroic impulses that animate every man. That makes a boy's adventure story worth reading. Okay?
Yes.
Well, I do the same thing here. And of course, I can't actually have a background that has psychics in it and stars and a star maker without things subtly sneaking in against my will into the foreground to make the thing actually about something rather deep. If you notice even something Star Wars, which is light and fun, by the third movie, that movie's about the redemption of your dark father, a guy who embodies all your own worst impulses, and you have to throw down your weapon in front of him? Are you kidding me? I'm sorry. It might seem like Buck Rogers to you and me, but it's actually deeper than that.
That's right.
So,
that's what makes it great.
That's what makes it great. In this book, I was aiming for greatness. So as soon as you rewrite the blurb for me, I'll put that up on Amazon. Yeah,
I mean, we were talking about this on my Discord yesterday, and we said, Star Wars almost became America's mythology. Like it almost was there. And then they just, they steered it into the wrong direction, and they
drove it off a cliff. It's because they hate America. I wish that were not the case.
And they hate the mythology.
I wish that were not the case.
Yep.
So whenever, and they spent $1 billion on this. They spent so much money on this.
I know.
So whenever Elon Musk or someone else decides to buy the intellectual property and hand it over to you and me,
that's right.
We can make something more like Space Pirates of Andromeda. We can make we can get it back on track. It's not that hard to do. All you have to do is be brave.
Call us, Elon. Call us. All right, John, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Really appreciate it.
My great pleasure, and I hope you and I can talk more just offline on other days, because it's been a long time since I've seen your face.
Absolutely, we will do that. We will do that. Everyone, I hope you're able to get out there and get Starquest Space Pirates of Andromeda. Also, don't forget, we're running the...
wait, I got to interrupt. I have to say one last thing. Starquest is the name of the Luke Skywalker. Starquest. Starquest is Jaywin Starquest's last name. That's where the name comes from.
Ah, nice. So, yeah, it's like the Skywalker saga. So there we go.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So pick up Starquest Space Pirates of Andromeda. It's on Amazon. Sequels coming in early 2025. And don't forget, we're still running the ACKS II Treasure Tome Kickstarter. Link is in the description. Be sure to check that out if you haven't already. John, thank you so much. We will follow up with you offline to chat about marketing and RPGs.
Very good.
Bye, everyone. Good night.